The wind howled across the barren prairie like a wounded animal, carrying with it the bitter taste of dust and loneliness. Calder Knox stood on the porch of his weathered ranch house, watching the storm clouds gather on the horizon. The land stretched endlessly before him, dry, cracked earth dotted with scraggly sagebrush and the occasional stubborn mesquite tree that refused to surrender to the harsh climate. His ranch sat isolated, a good hour's ride from the town of Broken Bluff, and that was exactly how he preferred it. The townsfolk had their opinions about him, whispered behind calloused hands in the general store and saloon. The man who buried his wife and then buried his heart with her, they'd say, crossing themselves as if his grief were contagious. Calder ran a hand through his dark hair, now streaked with premature gray at 32. The approaching storm reminded him of another night, 2 years past, when Elizabeth had labored through her final hours. He shook his head, banishing the memory, and turned to head inside. The first fat drops of rain began to fall as he secured the barn doors and checked on his horses. By the time he made it back to the house, the heavens had opened in earnest, turning the dusty yard into a river of mud. Thunder crashed overhead, rattling the windows in their frames. He had just settled by the fire with a cup of coffee when he heard it, a faint pounding barely audible above the storm. Calder froze, listening. There it was again, more insistent this time. Someone was at his door. In all his years at the ranch, he could count on one hand the number of unexpected visitors. His hand instinctively moved to the rifle mounted above the fireplace before he thought better of it. What kind of fool would be out in weather like this? He yanked open the heavy wooden door, and the sight before him made him step back in surprise. A young woman stood on his threshold, soaked to the bone, her once fine traveling dress now plastered to her slight frame. Mud caked her boots and hem, and her blonde hair hung in sodden strings around a face streaked with rain or tears. She clutched a battered valise in one hand, her knuckles white with the effort. "Please," she gasped, her voice barely carrying above the wind. "Please, sir, I need help." Calder's first instinct was to close the door. He didn't need complications, especially not in the form of a disheveled woman appearing like some spirit from the storm. But something in her eyes, a wild desperation mixed with genuine fear, made him hesitate. "Ma'am, you need to get to town. I can't." The words burst from her lips. "I can't go back there. Not tonight. Please, just for tonight." She swayed on her feet, and Calder caught her elbow before she could fall. Her skin was ice cold through the wet fabric. Against every ounce of his better judgment, he pulled her inside. "Sit," he commanded, guiding her to a chair by the fire. She sank into it gratefully, still clutching her valise as if it contained all her worldly possessions. Which, Calder reflected grimly, it very well might. He fetched a blanket from the bedroom, one of Elizabeth's quilts that he'd never had the heart to pack away, and draped it around her shoulders. "Name's Calder Knox," he said gruffly. "This is my ranch." "Lenora," she whispered, teeth chattering. "Lenora Mayfield." "Well, Miss Mayfield, you want to tell me what you're doing out in weather that ain't fit for man nor beast?" Fresh tears welled in her green eyes. I was supposed to be married. We came to Broken Bluff this morning on the stage, but when we stopped at the hotel, William said he needed to check on some business. He never came back." The story spilled out in broken fragments. Her fiancé, a man named William Hartley from back east, had courted her for months, promised her a new life in the territories. Her family had approved the match, eager to see her settled. They'd traveled for days to reach Broken Bluff, where William claimed to have property and prospects. The hotel keeper said William left on the afternoon stage, heading back east. "Left me with nothing but this." She gestured helplessly at her valise. "I waited until dark, thinking surely there was some mistake, but then the other guests began to stare and whisper." Calder poured her a cup of coffee, adding a generous splash of whiskey. She accepted it with trembling hands. He knew the kind of whispers she meant, a young woman, abandoned by her intended, alone in a rough frontier town. The gossips would feast on that story for months. You got family to wire? Someone who could send money for passage home?" Lenora shook her head slowly. "My parents, they sold everything to pay for my trousseau, believing William's promises about his prospects. I can't go back empty-handed. Ruined. I just can't." The fire crackled in the silence that followed. Calder studied her face in the flickering light. She was pretty enough, he supposed, though he'd long ago stopped noticing such things. What struck him was the combination of despair and stubborn pride in her expression. She wasn't the first woman to be taken in by smooth-talking swindler, and she wouldn't be the last, but most would have dissolved into hysteria by now. "You can stay the night," he heard himself saying. "Come morning, I'll take you back to town. Maybe the marshal can help track down this William fellow." "Thank you," she breathed. "You're very kind." Calder snorted. "Ain't kind. Ma'am, just practical. Can't have you catching your death on my doorstep." He showed her to the small spare room, dusty from disuse. She paused in the doorway, seeming to really see him for the first time. "Your wife—" "Dead," he said flatly. 2 years passed. I'm sorry." He shrugged and turned away. "Room's yours for tonight. There's water in the pitcher for washing. I'll be up at first light." But sleep eluded him. He lay in his own bed, listening to the storm rage outside and the occasional muffled sob from the room down the hall. He'd built this house for Elizabeth, every board and nail placed with their future in mind. Now it stood as empty as a tomb, holding nothing but memories and the occasional sound of his own footsteps. When dawn broke gray and watery, he found Lenora already in the kitchen. She'd attempted to tidy herself, though her dress was still damp and wrinkled beyond salvation. Her eyes were red-rimmed but dry, and she'd started a pot of coffee on the stove. "I thought I should make myself useful," she said quietly. Calder grunted his acknowledgement and sat down to pull on his boots. "Storms passed. I can have you in town within the hour." She turned to face him, hands twisted in her skirts. "Mr. Knox, I have a proposition." He looked up sharply. "That so? I can cook, clean, tend house. I'm not afraid of hard work. Let me stay on as your housekeeper, just for a week or two, until I can earn enough for stage fare to somewhere else. This ain't a proper arrangement. Miss, you, here alone with me. More proper than my returning to town to be gawked at and gossiped about." Her chin lifted. "I heard what they were already saying at the hotel. At least here, I could be useful instead of pitiful." Calder wanted to refuse. Everything in him screamed that this was a complication he didn't need. But looking at her standing there in his kitchen, trying so hard to maintain her dignity despite everything, he found himself remembering Elizabeth's words. "You've got to let some light in, Calder, or the darkness will swallow you whole." "1 week," he said finally. "You cook, clean, help with the chickens, I pay fair wages. End of the week. You take your earnings and move on." "We clear?" Relief flooded her face. "Crystal clear. Mr. Knox, you won't regret this." He was already regretting it as he headed out to tend the stock, leaving her to familiarize herself with the house. But a deal was a deal, and Calder Knox was nothing if not a man of his word. The rest of that first day passed in awkward silence. Lenora threw herself into cleaning with a vengeance, as if she could scour away her humiliation along with the dust. Calder kept to the barn and corrals, checking fences and working with a young stallion he was breaking. When he came in for the noon meal, he found she'd prepared a simple but satisfying spread of beans, cornbread, and preserved peaches. They ate without conversation, the only sounds the clink of forks against plates and the whistle of wind through the gaps in the walls. Calder found himself studying her when she wasn't looking. Her hands were soft, uncalloused, a lady's hands, not meant for frontier hardship, but there was something in the set of her shoulders, the determined way she attacked each task. That suggested hidden strength, as the sun set behind the distant mesas, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. Calder stood on the porch again. He could hear Lenora moving about inside, The domestic sounds, both foreign and achingly familiar. 1 week, he told himself firmly. Then she'd be gone, and his life would return to its customary emptiness. He didn't yet know that some storms, once invited in, refused to leave. The days settled into an uneasy rhythm. Lenora rose before dawn, had coffee ready when Calder came in from checking the stock, and set about her duties with quiet efficiency. She kept her distance, speaking only when necessary, moving through the house like a ghost, trying not to disturb the living. It was on the 4th night that Calder first noticed the letters. He'd come in late after tracking down a stray calf and found the kitchen empty, supper keeping warm on the stove. Passing by the spare room, he saw light seeping under the door and heard the scratch of pen on paper. Through the gap, he glimpsed Lenora bent over the small desk, writing by candlelight. Her face wore an expression of such intense concentration that he moved on without disturbing her. The next morning, she seemed more withdrawn than usual, dark circles shadowing her eyes. She served breakfast in silence, then excused herself to tend the chickens. Calder watched her go, unease prickling at the back of his neck. What kind of letters was she writing in the dead of night? His answer came 2 days later when she asked him to post a letter on his next trip to town. "I'd be obliged if you could send this," she said, not meeting his eyes as she handed him the sealed envelope. The name on the front made his jaw tighten. Mr. William Hartley, General Delivery, St. Louis, Missouri. But it was the return address that sent a flash of unexpected anger through him. She'd signed it, Mrs. Lenora Hartley. "Still writing to the man who abandoned you?" The words came out harsher than he'd intended. Color flooded her cheeks. "That's my business, Mr. Knox." "Is it? When you're living under my roof, working in my house? You offered me work, not judgment." Her green eyes flashed with sudden fire. "Will you post it or not?" He pocketed the letter roughly. "I'll post it." The ride to town gave him too much time to think. Why did it matter to him who she wrote to? She'd be gone in another day or two anyway. But the image of her signing that false name needled him. Mrs. Lenora Hartley. As if she still belonged to a man who'd left her stranded and desperate. When he returned that evening, she was politely distant, serving supper and retreating to her room without a word. But Calder had seen the valise by her bed, noticed how she'd been organizing it each night as if preparing for sudden departure. More letters to write, no doubt. The fragile peace shattered the next week when winter arrived with a vengeance. Calder woke to howling wind and a world transformed to white. Snow fell in thick curtains, obscuring everything beyond the porch. By noon, drifts were piling against the doors. By evening, they were well and truly snowed in. "How long will this last?" Lenora asked, peering anxiously out the frosted window. "Could be days, could be a week." He didn't add that he'd seen storms that lasted longer, cutting ranches off from civilization for a month or more. She absorbed this news in silence, fingers worrying at the worn fabric of her sleeve. The week he'd promised her had come and gone, and now nature itself conspired to keep her here. That night, the temperature plummeted. Calder kept the fires burning high, but cold seeped through every crack and gap. He was adding another log when he heard the crash from outside. The lean-to where he stored wood had collapsed under the snow's weight. He bundled up and fought his way out into the blizzard. The wind hit like a physical blow, driving ice crystals into his exposed skin. He managed to salvage what wood he could, but by the time he staggered back inside, he was shaking with cold. "Get those wet things off," Lenora ordered, suddenly all business. "You'll catch your death." His fingers were too numb to work the buttons. Without hesitation, she stepped forward and began unfastening his coat, her movements brisk and impersonal as a nurse. But when she pushed the heavy garment from his shoulders, her hands lingered for just a moment on his arms, and something shifted in the air between them. "I'll make something hot," she said quickly, turning away. "Sit by the fire." She brought him coffee laced with whiskey and a bowl of thick stew. As he ate, she perched on the opposite chair, watching him with worried eyes. "You could have been killed going out in that. Wood won't fetch itself. Stubborn man, she muttered, but there was something almost fond in her tone. The storm raged for 3 days, trapped together. The careful boundaries they'd maintained began to blur. Lenora still retreated to write her letters each night, but during the days, she lingered in the main room. They began to talk, careful, halting conversations about safe topics like the ranch, the weather, anything but the past that haunted them both. On the 3rd night, Calder woke to the sound of his own voice crying out. Another nightmare. Elizabeth calling for him while he stood frozen, unable to reach her. He lay in the dark, heart racing, when he heard soft footsteps in the hall. Mr. Knox? Lenora's voice came hesitantly through the door. Are you all right? Fine, he managed roughly. Go back to bed. But she didn't leave. He heard her sink down, probably sitting on the floor outside his room. My father used to have terrible dreams after the war, she said quietly. Sometimes talking helped. Nothing to talk about. All right. But still she stayed. After a long moment, she began to speak again. I dream about that hotel lobby sometimes, the way everyone looked at me when they realized William wasn't coming back, like I was something dirty, something broken. Calder found himself sitting up, moving to lean against the door. You're not broken, aren't I? A woman who couldn't even hold on to the man who promised to marry her. He was a fool and a coward, says nothing about you. He heard her shift position. Your wife, you loved her very much. It wasn't a question, but he answered anyway. Elizabeth she was everything good in this world. Gentle, kind. Always saw the best in people, even in me. Tell me about her. So he did, sitting there in the dark, separated by nothing but a thin wooden door. He found words he hadn't spoken aloud in 2 years. He told her about Elizabeth's laugh, how she'd insisted on planting roses by the porch, even though everyone said they'd never survive, how she'd sung while she worked, filling the empty spaces with music, how she'd faced her final hours with a courage that had humbled him. She sounds wonderful, Lenora whispered when he finally fell silent. She was. He pressed his palm flat against the door. I couldn't save her. The doctor was too far. And the baby, neither of them made it. Oh, Calder. His given name on her lips was soft as a prayer. I'm so sorry. They sat like that until dawn. 2 souls divided by wood and propriety, but united in grief. When pale light finally crept through the windows, Calder heard her rise. Thank you, she said softly, for telling me. The next day, the storm broke. Sun emerged to set the world sparkling, though the cold remained bitter. Calder threw himself into the work of digging out, clearing paths to the barn and checking on the stock. Several chickens had frozen in the coop, and he found one of his older cows down in the far pasture. He was trying to get the cow on her feet when Lenora appeared, bundled in one of his old coats that hung on her like a tent. What can I do? Get back to the house. This is no place for you. But she ignored him, wading through the snow to the cow's other side, together. They managed to get the animal up and moving towards shelter. By the time they got her settled with feed and water, both of them were exhausted and soaked with snow. Back at the house, Lenora set water to heat for baths. You first, she insisted. I'll start supper. When he emerged, cleaner and warmer, he found her standing by the stove, shivering. Without thinking, he draped a blanket around her shoulders, his hands lingering perhaps a moment too long. Your turn, he said gruffly. Water's still warm. While she bathed, he rummaged through Elizabeth's things, something he'd sworn never to do, but Lenora needed dry clothes, and practicality won over sentiment. He left a wool dress and clean undergarments outside the door, then busied himself with unnecessary tasks until she emerged. The sight of her in Elizabeth's blue dress hit him like a physical blow. It didn't fit quite right. Lenora was taller, narrower through the shoulders, but something about seeing life in those clothes again made his chest tight. I'm sorry, she said quickly, reading his face. I can change back. No. He turned away. It's fine. Cloth is meant to be worn, not molded away in trunks. That night after supper, she pulled out her valise again, but instead of writing materials, she withdrew a small, leather-bound journal. "I found this in the study," she admitted. "I know I shouldn't have read it, but it's your wife's diary." Calder's first instinct was anger, but looking at Lenora's face, he saw only compassion. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because she wrote about you, how you met, your courtship, your wedding day." She held out the journal. "I thought maybe you'd want to read it, to remember the joy, not just the loss." He took the diary with trembling hands, but couldn't bring himself to open it. "Not yet. Why do you still write to him?" he asked suddenly. "Hartley?" She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. "Because I need to believe that people don't just disappear, that there are reasons, explanations, that maybe I wasn't just something to be discarded. You're worth more than that." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and something electric passed between them. The moment stretched taut as a bowstring until she dropped her gaze. "I should retire," she said softly. "Good night, Mr. Knox." But as she passed him, he caught her hand. Her skin was soft, warm, alive under his calloused fingers. "Calder," he said roughly. "My name is Calder." She squeezed his hand once, quickly, then pulled away. "Good night, Calder." He sat by the dying fire long after she'd gone, Elizabeth's diary heavy in his lap, thinking about the dangerous thaw beginning in his frozen heart. The thaw came slowly to the prairie, both outside and within the walls of Calder's ranch. As February gave way to March, patches of brown earth emerged from beneath the snow, and with them, a tentative warmth grew between the rancher and his unexpected house guest. Calder found himself looking forward to the small rituals of their shared days. Morning coffee while discussing the day's tasks. Lenora's quiet humming as she worked, not singing like Elizabeth had, but a softer, almost unconscious melody. The way she'd taken to wearing her hair in a practical braid that left wisps framing her face. He'd given her permission to explore the small library he'd accumulated over the years, and most evenings found her curled in the chair by the fire with a book. Sometimes he'd catch her watching him over the pages, a thoughtful expression on her face that made him unaccountably nervous. "You can take the vegetables out to the root cellar," he told her one morning, setting a basket on the table. "I'll be mending the chicken coop roof." She nodded, but he noticed her hands trembling slightly as she reached for the basket. "Are you well?" "Just tired," she said, not meeting his eyes. "I didn't sleep well." He'd heard her moving about in the night, the familiar scratch of pen on paper, still writing those damned letters, though she hadn't asked him to post anymore. He wondered if she was waiting to take them all when she left. The thought sat like lead in his stomach. The day was mild enough that he shed his coat while working. He was balanced precariously on the coop roof when he heard Lenora's startled cry from the direction of the garden. Without thinking, he scrambled down and ran toward the sound. He found her standing frozen beside the vegetable patch, face pale as parchment. "What is it? Are you hurt?" "No, She gestured helplessly at the ground. "The roses. There are shoots coming up." He looked where she pointed and felt his breath catch. Elizabeth's roses, the ones everyone said would never survive, were sending up tiny green shoots through the last of the snow. "She planted them our first spring here," he said quietly. "I thought they died with her." Lenora's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "They were just waiting. Sometimes things we think are lost are only sleeping." The moment hung between them, fragile and profound. Then she swayed slightly, and he instinctively reached out to steady her. His hand found her waist, and suddenly they were standing much too close, her face tilted up toward his. "Calder," she whispered, and he wasn't sure if it was warning or invitation. His other hand came up to cup her cheek, thumb brushing away a tear that had escaped. She leaned into his touch, eyes fluttering closed, and he found himself lowering his head toward hers. Their lips had barely brushed when she jerked away, hand flying to her mouth. No, I can't. I'm sorry." She fled toward the house, leaving him standing among Elizabeth's roses, wondering what the hell he'd been thinking. Dinner that night was stilted, both of them carefully polite and avoiding eye contact. Lenora served the meal, then retreated to her room, claiming a headache. Calder sat alone at the table, appetite gone, trying to make sense of the chaos in his chest. He'd betrayed Elizabeth's memory. That's what it was. 2 years wasn't nearly long enough to forget the woman who'd been his whole world. And Lenora, she was still pining for another man, still signing another man's name. He was a fool to think otherwise, but he couldn't forget the way she'd felt in his arms, warm and alive and present in a way nothing had been since Elizabeth's death. He was mucking out stalls the next morning when she found him in the barn. She stood in the doorway, wrapped in a shawl, looking like she hadn't slept. "We need to talk," she said. He kept working, not trusting himself to look at her. "Nothing to talk about." "Please, Calder, I need to explain." "You don't owe me explanations." She stepped into the barn, moving closer. "Maybe not, but I want to give them anyway." He finally stopped, leaning on the pitchfork. "All right, talk." She took a deep breath. "William, he was everything my parents wanted for me. Charming, educated, from a good family. He promised me adventure, a new life away from the constraints of Baltimore society. I thought I loved him. Thought. I love the idea of him, of escape, of being chosen." She wrapped the shawl tighter around herself. "But when he left me at that hotel, I realized I'd never really known him at all. The man I'd built up in my mind didn't exist. Yet you still write to him." A bitter smile touched her lips. "I write letters I'll never send. Pages and pages of anger and hurt and questions that will never have answers. It's foolish, I know, but somehow putting it on paper makes it feel less like it's eating me alive." Calder felt something ease in his chest. "You never sent them?" "Just the one, and that was before." She moved closer still, close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her green eyes. "Before I understood that the life I thought I wanted might not be what I need at all." "Lenora, I know you still love her," she said quickly. "I see it in the way you touch her things, the way you look at those roses, and I would never ask you to forget her. But Calder, you're not the only one who's been sleeping instead of living." He set aside the pitchfork and reached for her, slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she stepped into his embrace instead, he felt something crack open inside his chest. "I'm not an easy man," he warned, voice rough. "Set in my ways, used to solitude. I'm not asking for easy." Her hands came up to rest against his chest. "I'm asking for real, for honest, for the chance to see what might grow if we tend it, like those roses." He kissed her then, properly this time. Not the desperate passion of people grasping for any warmth in the cold, but something deliberate and careful and full of possibility. When they finally broke apart, both breathing unsteadily, he rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he said simply. "Not as my housekeeper. Stay as whatever you want to be." "What do you want me to be?" He considered the question seriously. "I don't know yet, but I'd like the time to figure it out." She smiled, the first full, genuine smile he'd seen from her. "Then I'll stay." The shift in their relationship changed everything and nothing. She still kept house and cooked meals. He still worked the ranch from dawn to dusk. But now there were shared glances across the dinner table, brief touches as they passed in the hallway, evenings spent talking by the fire instead of reading in separate silence. One afternoon, he came in to find her in the spare room, feeding pages to the small stove, the letters to William, he realized. She looked up at his entrance, chin lifted defiantly. "It's time," she said simply. He helped her burn them all, watching years of hurt and false promises turn to ash. When the last page was gone, she turned to him with tears streaming down her face, and he held her while she cried for the girl who'd believed in fairy tales. That night, she moved her few possessions into his room. They lay together in the dark, her head on his chest, listening to the wind sing across the prairie. "I need to tell you something." she said quietly. My name. I've been signing it wrong all this time. He stroked her hair, waiting. I'm not Lenora Mayfield. Haven't been for a while now. She tilted her face up to his. Somewhere between that first storm and now, I became someone new, someone who belongs here, if you'll have me. And who might that be? She was quiet for a long moment. I don't know yet, but she's not the girl who came to your door that night. And she's not Mrs. William Hartley. She's just herself. Is that enough? He tightened his arms around her. More than enough. They made love for the first time as the moon rose full and bright, casting silver light across the bed. It was tender and careful. Two damaged souls learning each other's rhythms and scars. Afterward, she traced patterns on his chest while he played with her unbound hair. The townspeople will talk, she warned. An unmarried woman living with you. Let them talk. Never cared for their opinions anyway. She laughed softly. My practical rancher. What about when we need supplies? When we have to face them? Then we face them together. He caught her hand, bringing it to his lips. I'm not William Hartley. Lenora, I don't run when things get complicated. I know. She curled closer to him. That's why I'm still here. As sleep took them, Calder thought about Elizabeth's roses pushing through the frozen ground, about resurrection and second chances and the strange ways Grace sometimes arrived, storm-tossed and desperate, knocking at your door when you least expected it. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. The ranch needed tending, the townspeople would need facing, and two wounded hearts would need to continue their careful dance toward trust. But tonight, with Lenora warm in his arms and spring stirring in the earth outside, anything seemed possible. Even hope, especially hope. The morning after dawned cold and bright, with frost painting delicate patterns on the windows. Calder woke first, momentarily disoriented by the warm weight against his side. Then memory flooded back, and with it, a confusion of emotions that made him carefully extract himself from Lenora's sleeping form. He dressed quietly and escaped to the barn, needing the familiar routine of morning chores to settle his churning thoughts. What had he done? The night before had felt inevitable, necessary even, but in the harsh light of day, doubt crept in like smoke through cracks. When he finally returned to the house, Lenora was at the stove, her movements precise and controlled. She didn't turn when he entered, though he saw her shoulders tense. Coffee's ready, she said, her voice carefully neutral. They ate breakfast in strained silence, the easy companionship of recent weeks replaced by something brittle and uncertain. Finally, Calder couldn't stand it. About last night, it was a mistake. The words came out flat, definitive. She still wouldn't look at him. We both know it. I'll pack my things today. The roads are clear enough now. Is that what you want? She finally turned, and he was shocked to see her eyes red-rimmed and swollen. What I want doesn't matter. We got carried away, that's all. Spring fever or loneliness or whatever you want to call it. But we both know I don't belong here. The hell you don't. The vehemence in his own voice surprised him. You've been belonging here more every day. As your housekeeper, your charity case. She laughed bitterly. Not as this, whatever this is. Lenora, I'm not her. Calder. The words burst out of her like water through a dam. I'm not Elizabeth. I can't be her replacement, and it's not fair to either of us to pretend otherwise. He crossed to her in 2 strides, catching her shoulders. I'm not asking you to be Elizabeth. Aren't you? Tears spilled down her cheeks. Last night, you called her name. The words hit him like a physical blow. He released her, stepping back. I did? She nodded miserably. Just once, but once was enough. Shame flooded through him, hot and nauseating. He sank into a chair, head in his hands. God, Lenora, I'm sorry. I didn't realize. I know. Her voice was gentle now, resigned. That's what makes it worse. You weren't trying to hurt me. You just forgot who I was. They stood on opposite sides of the kitchen, the distance between them feeling like miles. Outside, a meadowlark sang its morning song, oblivious to the human drama unfolding. "I'll go to town," Calder said finally. "Get supplies. Give you time to do whatever you need to do." She nodded, turning back to the stove. That would be best. He hitched up the wagon mechanically, his mind replaying every moment of the night before. Had he really called Elizabeth's name? The thought made him sick. He'd used Lenora, treated her like a substitute for his dead wife. No wonder she wanted to leave. The ride to town passed in a blur. He was loading supplies at the general store when Sheriff Morrison approached, thumbs hooked in his vest. "Knox, heard you got yourself some company out at your place." Calder's jaw tightened. "My business? Sheriff? Maybe so, but got some news might interest you." Morrison spat tobacco juice into the street. "Got a wire from the marshal in Cheyenne. They picked up a fellow named William Hartley trying to sell claims to land he don't own. Thought you might want to pass that along to your house guest." The implications of the news followed Calder all the way home. Hartley was a confirmed swindler, which meant Lenore was truly free of any obligation to him. But what did that change? She still wanted to leave, and he'd given her every reason to go. He expected to find the house empty when he returned, her few possessions gone. Instead, he found her in the garden, kneeling beside Elizabeth's roses. She'd cleared away the dead growth and built small protective walls of stones around each plant. "You're still here," he said stupidly. She looked up, dirt smudging her cheek. "I couldn't leave them untended. They deserve better than that." Something in her voice broke his heart. "Lenora, about what I said." "Don't." She stood, brushing off her skirts. "Please, let's just get through today." But getting through the day proved harder than either anticipated. They moved around each other like wounded animals, careful not to touch, speaking only when necessary. The very air between them felt charged with unspoken words and suppressed longing. That evening, as Lenora prepared supper, a pot slipped from her grasp, sending hot water across the floor. She cried out, jumping back, and Calder was there instantly, pulling her away from the scalding splash. "Are you hurt?" He examined her hands, her arms, searching for burns. "I'm fine," she said, but her voice shook. They were standing close again, his hands gentle on her skin, and the careful walls they'd built throughout the day crumbled like sand. "Don't go," he whispered. "Please, I know I've made a mess of things, but don't go." She looked up at him, eyes swimming with tears. "How can I stay? Every time you look at me, you see her. Every time you touch me." "No." He cupped her face in his hands. "Last night, I was a fool. I was scared. It's been so long since I felt anything but grief. And when I finally did, I didn't know how to handle it. But Lenora, when I look at you, I see you. Your strength, your kindness, the way you hum when you think I'm not listening, the way you bite your lip when you're concentrating on a book. Calder, I see the woman who faced down a blizzard to help with my stock, who burns her past to make room for her future, who tends roses she didn't plant because she understands that some things are worth saving." His voice dropped. "I see the woman who's made this empty house feel like home again." She was crying openly now, and he brushed away her tears with trembling thumbs. "But you loved her so much. I did. I do. Part of me always will." He took a shaky breath. "But Elizabeth is gone, and I'm still here, and for the first time in 2 years, I want to be here. Not just existing, but living. You did that. Lenora, you brought me back to life. I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "I don't know how to love someone who's already had their great love. Maybe there's no such thing as just one great love," he said. "Maybe we get as many chances as we're brave enough to take." She searched his face, looking for truth, for certainty, for something to hold on to. What she found must have satisfied her because she rose up on her toes and kissed him, soft and sweet and full of tentative hope. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. Stay, he said again. Not as my housekeeper or my charity case or my anything else. Just as Lenora. That's all I want. That's everything I want. On one condition, she said, a watery smile touching her lips. Name it. No more pretending. No more careful distances. We try this. Really try it. Mess and all. Mess and all. He agreed. They spent that night talking until dawn, sharing stories and fears and dreams they'd kept locked away. He told her about his childhood in Texas, about the drought that drove his family north. She told him about growing up in Baltimore's rigid society, always feeling like she was suffocating in corsets and expectations. Is that why you were so quick to accept Hartley's proposal? He asked. She considered this. Partly, but also, I wanted to matter to someone, to be chosen. My sisters all married well, had children, fit perfectly into the life my mother planned for them. I was the odd one, always reading, always dreaming of something more. And now I wonder if more isn't about distance or adventure. Maybe it's about depth, about finding someone who sees you clearly and wants you anyway. As the sun rose, painting the prairie in shades of gold and rose, they stood together on the porch. Lenora leaned into his side, his arm around her waist, both of them tired but somehow renewed. The sheriff had news. Calder said, Hartley's been arrested for fraud. She absorbed this quietly. Good. Other women won't suffer what I did. How do you feel about it? She thought for a moment. Free, she said finally. Completely free. Free to leave if you want, he reminded her, though the words cost him. Free to stay if I choose, she countered, tilting her face up to his. And I choose this. I choose you, mess and all. He kissed her as the meadowlarks began their morning chorus, as Elizabeth's roses stretched toward the sun, as the prairie wind whispered promises of spring and new beginnings. When they finally went inside, it was together, facing whatever came next as they would face everything now, side by side, honest and unafraid. The past would always be part of them. Elizabeth's memory, William's betrayal, these things had shaped them, brought them to this moment. But they were not defined by their losses anymore. They were defined by their choice to try again, to risk again, to love again despite the fear and uncertainty. And sometimes, Calder thought as Lenora smiled at him across the kitchen table, that was the bravest thing of all. Word of Lenora's presence at the Knox Ranch spread through Broken Bluff like wildfire in dry grass. It started as whispers in the general store, grew to gossip at the Sunday social, and by the third week had become the town's favorite scandal. That woman he's keeping, Mrs. Henderson told anyone who'd listen. The one who was abandoned at the hotel, still living out there, bold as brass. Shameful, agreed Mrs. Palmer, though her eyes gleamed with the pleasure of fresh scandal. What kind of woman takes up with a man that way? Calder knew about the talk, had expected it, but he underestimated how quickly it would escalate. The first sign of real trouble came when he went to town for supplies and found Tom Garrett, the bank owner, waiting at the general store. Need a word. Knox, Garrett said, steering him aside. About your situation. My situation's no concern of yours. It is when it reflects on the whole community. Garrett's face was stern beneath his carefully waxed mustache. We're trying to build a respectable town here, having unmarried women living in sin. Careful, Calder warned, voice low and dangerous. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. If you've got intentions toward the woman, make them proper. If not, send her on her way. The town council's prepared to take action if necessary. Calder left without his supplies, rage burning hot in his chest. But worse than his own anger was the look on Lenora's face when he told her about the encounter. They want me gone, she said quietly, sinking into a chair. Of course they do. To hell with what they want. It's not that simple. She looked up at him, eyes troubled. You need this town. Calder, you need to be able to buy supplies, sell your cattle. You can't make an enemy of everyone for my sake. Watch me. But the pressure continued to build. The next Sunday, Reverend Mills paid an unexpected visit. his narrow face pinched with disapproval. "Mr. Knox, I've come to discuss the state of your immortal soul," he announced, barely acknowledging Lenora's presence. "My soul's between me and the Almighty." Calder replied, "Don't recall inviting you to mediate. The Lord's work doesn't require invitation." Mills turned his sharp gaze on Lenora. "Miss Mayfield, surely you understand the position you've put Mr. Knox in. A godly woman would remove herself from temptation." Lenora's chin lifted. "A godly man wouldn't judge situations he doesn't understand. The situation is clear enough. You're living in sin, bringing shame on this house and this community." "Get out," Calder said quietly. Mills drew himself up. "Mr. Knox, get off my land before I throw you off." After the Reverend left, Lenora retreated to the garden, where Calder found her viciously pulling weeds. "Maybe he's right," she said without looking up. "Maybe I should go." He knelt beside her, stilling her hands. "You're not going anywhere." "But the town can go to hell, all of them." She managed a weak smile. "You can't fight the whole town for me. Calder, I can try." The breaking point came 3 days later. Calder returned from checking his herd to find 5 men on horseback in his yard. Sheriff Morrison, Tom Garrett, and 3 members of the town council, hard-faced men who'd helped build Broken Bluff from nothing and felt ownership over its moral character. "Gentlemen," Calder said coldly, "this is private property. We're here on official business," Morrison said, though he looked uncomfortable. "The town council has concerns about the irregular situation here." "Nothing irregular about it." "An unmarried woman living with you?" Garrett's voice dripped disdain. "That's about as irregular as it gets. We're prepared to offer Miss Mayfield passage to wherever she wants to go. It's a generous offer. And if she doesn't want to go?" One of the councilmen, a rough man named Hank Sawyer, spat tobacco juice near Lenora's carefully tended garden. "Then we might have to reconsider whether Knox Ranch is the kind of operation we want near our town." The threat was clear. They could make it impossible for him to do business, to buy supplies or sell cattle. They could effectively starve him out. Lenora appeared in the doorway. Having heard everything, her face was pale but composed. "Gentlemen, I appreciate your concern for my welfare." "It ain't your welfare we're concerned about," Sawyer interrupted. "It's the reputation of decent folks." "Then let me ease your minds." She stepped onto the porch, every inch the Baltimore lady despite her simple dress. "Mr. Knox has been nothing but honorable. He offered me shelter when I had nowhere else to go, employment when I had no means of support. If there's shame in Christian charity, then perhaps you need to reread your Bibles." "Christian charity doesn't usually involve sharing a bed," Garrett said crudely. The crack of Calder's fist against Garrett's jaw was loud in the afternoon stillness. The banker went down hard, and suddenly everyone was shouting, hands moving to weapons. "Enough!" Morrison stepped between them. "Knox, you just assaulted a member of the town council. He insulted a lady in my home." "Lady?" Sawyer laughed. "That what we're calling them now?" Calder took a step toward him, but Lenora caught his arm. "Don't," she said quietly. "They're not worth it." Morrison helped Garrett to his feet. The banker's eye was already swelling, and he looked murderous. "You'll regret that, Knox." "I doubt it. We came here to offer a peaceful solution." Morrison said, "Miss Mayfield leaves town quiet-like, and everybody goes back to their business. Nobody needs to get hurt." "Too late for that," Calder said. "Then you've made your choice." Garrett mounted his horse awkwardly, still holding his jaw. "Don't come crying when you can't buy so much as a nail in Broken Bluff." They rode off in a cloud of dust and threats, leaving Calder and Lenora alone in the yard. She was trembling, though whether from anger or fear, he couldn't tell. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "This is all my fault?" "No." He pulled her against him. "This is their fault for being small-minded fools. But they can ruin you. Everything you've built means nothing without someone to share it with." She pulled back to look at him. "You can't mean that. I mean every word." He cupped her face in his hands. Lenora, I've spent 2 years just existing, going through the motions. Then you showed up and reminded me what it feels like to be alive. You think I'm going to give that up because Tom Garrett doesn't approve? But your ranch is just land and cattle. It can be rebuilt anywhere. But this, he pressed his hand over her heart, this is irreplaceable. That night, as they lay entwined in bed, Lenora traced patterns on his chest. What are we going to do? Whatever we have to. There are other towns, other places to buy supplies. It'll be harder, but not impossible. That's not what I meant. She propped herself up on an elbow. Calder, they're not entirely wrong. We are living in sin, by any conventional measure. He was quiet for a long moment. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe we should consider making this official. You mean marriage? Would that be so terrible? He studied her face in the moonlight. Is that what you want? Or is it just to appease the town? Forget the town. She leaned down to kiss him softly. What do you want? What did he want? 6 months ago, he'd wanted nothing but to be left alone with his grief. Now, I want to wake up beside you every morning, he said slowly. I want to watch you tend those roses through every season. I want to build something with you, something real and lasting. If that means marriage, then yes, but not for them. For us. She smiled, bright and beautiful. Is that a proposal, Mr. Knox? Seems like it might be. He rolled them over, pinning her beneath him. But I should probably do it proper. Will you marry me, Lenora? Will you take on a stubborn rancher with more pride than sense? Only if you'll take on a ruined woman with a scandalous past. You're not ruined, he said fiercely. You're perfect. Then yes, she whispered against his lips. Yes, I'll marry you. They made love with a new tenderness, sealing promises with touch and breath and whispered endearments. Afterward, Lenora lay with her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. When? She asked. Soon as possible. We'll go to the next county if we have to. Find a judge who doesn't know our business. Or, she said slowly, we could do it here, in front of everyone. Show them we're not ashamed. Calder considered this. You sure you want that? They haven't been kind to you. No, they haven't. But running away feels like admitting we did something wrong. She sat up, eyes fierce. I want to walk through that town as your wife. I want them to see that their judgment didn't break us. He pulled her back down, kissing her thoroughly. Have I mentioned that you're magnificent? Once or twice. She smiled against his mouth. But I don't mind hearing it again. They fell asleep making plans, defiant and hopeful in equal measure. Neither knew that by morning, everything would change again. That the past Lenora thought she'd burned would arrive on their doorstep demanding its due. But for now, wrapped in each other and their newfound purpose, they were invincible. The prairie winds sang around the house, and Elizabeth's roses nodded in the darkness, bearing witness to new love taking root in ground that had known such sorrow. The morning of their planned trip to town dawned bright and clear. Lenora wore her best dress, the blue one that had been Elizabeth's, and Calder had trimmed his beard and put on his Sunday shirt. They were going to face down the town's disapproval and find someone to marry them, even if they had to ride to the next county. But as they prepared to leave, the sound of approaching horses made them both freeze. Calder stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand, expecting another delegation from the town council. Instead, he saw a single rider approaching, a well-dressed man on a fine bay horse, followed by a buggy driven by a younger man. The rider dismounted with practiced ease, and Calder's jaw tightened as he took in the expensive cut of the man's clothes. The gold watch chain, the air of Eastern privilege. He knew who this was before the man even spoke. I'm looking for Miss Lenora Mayfield, the stranger said, removing his hat to reveal carefully styled brown hair. I was told I might find her here. Lenora appeared in the doorway, and all color drained from her face. William Hartley smiled, the same charming smile that had once convinced a Baltimore girl to follow him west. Hello, my dear. I've come to make things right. You've come too late, Calder said flatly. She wants nothing to do with you. Hartley's eyes flicked dismissively over Calder before returning to Lenora. I'd prefer to hear that from the lady herself. Lenora, darling, might we speak privately? No. She stepped closer to Calder. Whatever you have to say, you can say in front of Mr. Knox. Very well. Hartley straightened his cuffs, a gesture Calder recognized as buying time. I know I hurt you. Leaving as I did was unfortunate, but I had no choice. There were debts, urgent business matters that required immediate attention. I fully intended to return for you. After 3 months? Lenora's voice was steady, but Calder could see her hands trembling. After leaving me with nothing but humiliation? I wrote to you dozens of letters explaining everything. When they went unanswered, I feared the worst. He took a step closer, his voice dropping to an intimate register. I've spent months searching for you. My dear, when I heard rumors of a woman matching your description living out here, well, I came immediately. How did you escape? Calder asked bluntly. Last we heard, you were in custody in Cheyenne. Hartley's composure slipped for just a moment. A misunderstanding, I assure you. All charges were dropped once I explained the situation. The properties in question were legitimately mine to sell. Liar, Lenora said quietly. Lenora, please. Hartley's voice took on a pleading tone. I know you have every reason to doubt me, but I'm here now. I have money, prospects, everything I promised you. We can still have the life we planned. He reached into his coat and withdrew a small velvet box. I've carried this with me everywhere, hoping to find you. He opened it to reveal a large diamond ring. Marry me, Lenora. Today, let me make this right. The silence stretched taut. Calder watched Lenora's face, saw the play of emotions across it, shock, anger, and something else he couldn't quite name. You carried that ring while you abandoned me? She asked finally. While I stood in that hotel lobby, being whispered about and pitied. I had no choice. You had every choice. The words exploded from her. You chose to leave. You chose your schemes over your promises. You chose to let me believe I wasn't worth staying for. That's not true. Lenora, you must understand. The opportunity in Cheyenne was time-sensitive. If I delayed even a day... Stop. She held up a hand. Just stop. I don't want to hear any more lies. Hartley's expression hardened. I see. You've found yourself a protector. He looked at Calder with calculating eyes. I wonder, does he know the full truth about you, my dear? About your father's debts? About why your family was so eager to see you married off? Lenora went very still. That has nothing to do with this, doesn't it? Hartley smiled coldly. Tell me, Mr. Knox, did she mention that her father owes nearly $10,000 to various creditors? That marrying her to me was their way of settling those debts? I'm curious if she told you that you've taken in damaged goods in more ways than one. The crack of Lenora's palm against Hartley's cheek echoed across the yard. How dare you? Hartley touched his reddening cheek, his civilized mask finally slipping entirely. You always did have too much spirit for your own good, but no matter. I'm prepared to overlook your current situation. Your father's debts still stand. Lenora, without my protection, your family faces ruin. Is your pride really worth that? Calder had heard enough. Get off my land. I'm not leaving without my fiancée. She's not your anything. Calder stepped between them. The lady asked you to go. Don't make me repeat it. This is absurd. Hartley appealed to Lenora again. You can't seriously prefer this backwater rancher to what I'm offering. Think of your family, Lenora. Think of your sister's reputations. I am thinking of them, Lenora said quietly. I'm thinking they're better off without a connection to you. You little fool! Calder's fist connected solidly with Hartley's jaw, sending him sprawling in the dust. The younger man in the buggy jumped down, but froze when Calder turned to him. Your boss needs to learn when he's not welcome. Calder said mildly, I suggest you help him to his horse before I decide he needs another lesson. Hartley struggled to his feet, expensive suit now dusty and disheveled. You'll regret this, he snarled, all pretense of charm gone. Both of you, I have connections, influence. I can make your lives very difficult. You already have, Lenora said. She pulled the ring from her finger, the simple band Calder had given her that morning as a promise, and held it up. See this? This is worth more than anything you ever offered me, because the man who gave it to me has never lied to me, never abandoned me, never treated me as a commodity to be traded for advantage. She moved to stand beside Calder, taking his hand. I'm going to marry this man, William. Today, if possible, in front of the whole town that you left me to face alone. And then I'm going to build a life here, a real life based on truth and respect and actual love, the kind of life you could never have given me. Hartley's face twisted with rage and something else, disbelief that his charm had failed, that his promises no longer held power. Your father will have to find another way to settle his debts. I'm done being currency in other people's transactions. You're making a mistake. The only mistake I made was believing you in the first place. She turned to Calder. We have a wedding to attend to. I believe we're running late. Calder smiled at her fierce pride. Yes, ma'am, we are. They watched Hartley climb awkwardly onto his horse, assisted by his companion. He looked back once, and in his eyes was the petty fury of a man who'd lost a possession he'd considered his by right. This isn't over, he warned. Yes, it is, Lenora said firmly. Goodbye, William. After the dust of their departure settled, Lenora sagged against Calder. I'm sorry, about my father, about the debts. I should have told you. Doesn't matter. But $10,000, Lenora. He turned her to face him. I don't care if your father owes $1 million. I don't care if you come with nothing but the clothes on your back. I'm not marrying your family or their debts. I'm marrying you. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I don't deserve you. Other way around, darling. He wiped her tears with his thumb. Now, we've got a town to scandalize and a judge to find. You still want to do this? She laughed, watery but genuine. More than ever. I want the whole town to see that William Hartley has no claim on me, that I choose you, publicly and proudly. They climbed into the wagon, Lenora sitting tall beside him despite everything. As they rolled toward town, Calder reached over to squeeze her hand. No regrets? He asked. None. She lifted their joined hands to her lips. He offered me diamonds and lies. You offered me truth and roses. It wasn't even a choice. They drove into Broken Bluff with heads high, ready to face whatever judgment awaited them. Behind them, Elizabeth's roses bloomed in the garden, and ahead, the future stretched out full of possibility. The ghosts of the past had come calling, but they'd been faced down and sent packing. Now there was only the present and the promise of tomorrow, built on a foundation of honest love and mutual choice. And that, Lenora thought as the town came into view, was worth more than all the diamonds and schemes in the world. Spring arrived in earnest, painting the prairie in shades of green and gold. The ranch thrived under their joint care. Calder's experience combined with Lenora's quick learning and natural intuition for the land. She'd taken to the life with surprising ease, trading her Eastern refinements for practical skills without complaint. Their wedding had been a simple affair at the courthouse, witnessed by a reluctant clerk and a traveling salesman who'd happened to be passing through. The town had largely shunned them since, but neither minded. They had each other, and that was enough. On this particular morning, Lenora stood in the garden, admiring Elizabeth's roses, which had burst into magnificent bloom. She wore trousers now, a scandalous choice that would have horrified her Baltimore relations, finding them far more practical for ranch work. Getting an early start? Calder called from the porch, coffee cup in hand. The beans need planting if we want them ready by late summer. She brushed dirt from her hands, smiling up at him. And I wanted to check on Buttercup. She's close to calving. Buttercup was a young heifer Lenora had taken special interest in. spending hours gentling the animal until she would eat from Lenora's hand. Calder had watched his wife's transformation with wonder, from the desperate, frightened woman at his door to this capable partner who could birth calves and break horses with equal skill. "I'll come with you after breakfast," he offered. They worked side by side through the morning, checking fences and tending stock. The boycott from town had forced them to become more self-sufficient, and in many ways, it had been a blessing. They'd learned to make do, to create what they needed, to rely on each other completely. It was near noon when they heard horses approaching. Calder tensed, hand moving to the rifle that was never far from reach these days. But instead of trouble, they found Judge Thomas Brennan from the county seat, along with a younger man in Eastern clothes. "Mr. Knox, Mrs. Knox." The judge tipped his hat. "Sorry to intrude, but I have some legal matters to discuss." Lenora's face had gone pale. "Is it William? Has he—" "No, ma'am. This concerns your late father's estate." "My father?" Lenora gripped Calder's arm. "Late father?" The judge's weathered face softened. "I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news. Your father passed away 3 weeks ago. Heart failure, according to the doctors." Lenora sank onto the porch steps. Calder immediately beside her. "I didn't know. I haven't been in contact with my family since your marriage. Yes, your mother mentioned as much." The judge gestured to the younger man. "This is Mr. Samuel Hartwell, from Hartwell and Associates in Baltimore. He's been handling your father's affairs." Hartwell stepped forward, producing a leather folder. "Mrs. Knox, I've been instructed to inform you of your inheritance." "Inheritance?" Lenora laughed bitterly. "My father had nothing but debts, $10,000 worth, last I knew." "Actually, ma'am, that's not entirely accurate." Hartwell adjusted his spectacles. "Your father had substantial life insurance policies, unknown to most of the family. Additionally, there were investments that matured after his death. After settling all debts, the estate is quite solvent." Lenora stared at him. "I don't understand. Your father left specific instructions. The bulk of the estate goes to your mother and sisters, but he set aside a portion for you, $20,000, to be exact." The silence that followed was absolute. $20,000. A fortune by any standard. Enough to buy a dozen ranches or live comfortably for years. "There must be some mistake," Lenora said faintly. "No mistake. Your father's letter explained his reasoning." Hartwell withdrew an envelope. He asked that this be delivered to you personally. With trembling hands, Lenora opened the letter. Calder read over her shoulder, his arm around her waist for support. "My dearest Lenora," it began. "If you are reading this, then I am gone and the truth can finally be told. The debts I allowed William Hartley to believe in were largely fabricated, a test of his character that he failed spectacularly. No man who truly loved you would have seen you as collateral for financial gain. I know I failed you as a father. I let society's expectations and your mother's ambitions overshadow your happiness. When word reached us of your circumstances, abandoned, forced to make your own way, I was both heartbroken and proud. You showed the courage I never had. This money is my apology and my blessing. Use it to build the life you choose, not the one chosen for you. Your mother tells me you have married a rancher. If he makes you happy, then he has my belated approval. Live well, my brave girl. Live free. Your loving father, James Mayfield." Lenora was sobbing by the time she'd finished reading, clutching the letter to her chest. Calder held her as she grieved, for the father she'd lost, for the understanding that came too late, for the complicated mixture of love and regret that characterized so many family relationships. When her tears finally slowed, Judge Brennan cleared his throat. "There's one more matter. William Hartley has been making claims on the estate, asserting that as your former fiancé, he has certain rights." "He has no rights," Calder said sharply. "Legally, you're correct, but he's been causing difficulties in Baltimore, spreading rumors about Mrs. Knox's character, suggesting she was compromised before abandoning their engagement." "That bastard!" However, the judge continued with a small smile. Your father anticipated this. The will specifically states that any attempts to claim against the estate based on previous engagements or promises would result in legal action. Mr. Hartwell here has already filed charges against Hartley for harassment and defamation. Additionally, Hartwell added, several of Hartley's victims from various land schemes have come forward. He's facing significant jail time. He won't be troubling you again. Lenora wiped her eyes, squeezing Calder's hand. Thank you for coming all this way to tell me. There are papers to sign, transfer documents and such. Hartwell produced more forms. The money can be made available to you within a few weeks. As Lenora signed where indicated, Calder's mind raced. $20,000 would change everything. They could expand the ranch, buy better stock, build a proper barn, or they could leave entirely, start fresh somewhere without the weight of gossip and judgment. After the men left, promising to send word when the funds were ready, Lenora and Calder sat in silence on the porch. The afternoon sun warmed their faces, and the prairie wind carried the scent of roses and new grass. It doesn't feel real, Lenora said finally. The money? All of it. All of 6 months ago. I was preparing to marry a man I didn't really know, living a life planned by others. Now, she gestured at the ranch, at him, at her work-worn hands. Now I'm here, married to a man I love, working land that feels like home, and suddenly wealthy enough to do anything. What do you want to do? She was quiet for a long moment. I used to dream of traveling, seeing San Francisco, maybe even Paris, having adventures. Calder's chest tightened. We could do that, with that money. But that was before, she interrupted. Before I understood that adventure isn't about distance traveled. It's about depth discovered. She turned to him. Every day here has been an adventure. Learning to rope cattle, birth calves, read the weather in cloud patterns, learning to love again after betrayal, learning to be loved after loss. But now you have choices, real choices. I've always had choices. This money just makes them easier. She stood, pulling him up with her. I choose to stay. I choose to use some of the money to expand the ranch. Maybe buy the Hendricks place next door if they're still selling. I choose to build something lasting here, with you. Lenora, unless, her voice faltered, unless you want something different. This is your home, your land. I don't want to impose my dreams. He silenced her with a kiss, pouring all his love and gratitude into the connection. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. Your dreams are my dreams now. We build this together, or not at all. She smiled, bright and beautiful. Then we'll show this town what two outcasts can accomplish. We'll make this ranch the finest in the territory. With $20,000, we could certainly make a good start. Actually, she said with a mischievous glint in her eye, I was thinking we might use some of it differently. How so? Well, the school in town needs rebuilding. The church roof leaks. The widow Martinez has been struggling since her husband died. She watched his face carefully. My father's letter said to live well. Maybe living well means lifting others up too. Calder stared at his wife in amazement. You want to help the town that shunned us? I want to be better than they were. I want our children. She stopped, color flooding her cheeks. Our children. His heart began to race. She took his hand, placing it on her still flat stomach. I wasn't sure, but I missed my monthly, and I've been sick in the mornings. Joy exploded through him, followed quickly by fear. Elizabeth had died in childbirth. The thought of losing Lenora. Don't. She cupped his face, reading his thoughts. This is different. I'm strong, and will get the best doctor money can buy. This child will be born into love and plenty. He pulled her against him, burying his face in her hair. Our children, he repeated, testing the words. God, Lenora. Are you happy? Happy doesn't begin to cover it. They stood wrapped in each other as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: money to manage, a ranch to expand, a baby to prepare for. The town would have to be faced eventually, their judgment either overcome or outlasted. But tonight, with Lenora in his arms and new life growing between them, Calder felt richer than any fortune could make him. They'd both come to this place broken and alone, carrying the weight of loss and betrayal. Together, they'd found healing and hope in a love that transcended their pasts. "I love you," Lenora whispered against his chest. "Thank you for taking in a crying bride that night. Thank you for knocking on my door," he replied, "for refusing to let me bury myself with my grief." As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, they went inside together, ready to face whatever came next. The future stretched before them, bright with promise and possibility, built on a foundation of choice and courage and trust. And in the garden, Elizabeth's roses bloomed in wild profusion, a testament to the beauty that could grow from sorrow when tended with loving hands. Months slipped by like water through fingers, each day bringing new growth to both the ranch and Lenora's swelling belly. The money from her inheritance had been put to good use. They'd purchased the neighboring property, doubled their herd, and built a new barn that stood proud against the prairie sky. But more than physical improvements, there had been a shift in how they were perceived. Their anonymous donations to the church roof and the school had not gone unnoticed. When the widow Martinez's children showed up at school in new clothes and with full lunch pails, people began to whisper, but this time with something approaching respect. It was a crisp October morning when Lenora felt the first pains. Calder was in the far pasture, and by the time she reached the porch, she could barely stand. Mrs. Rodriguez, the Mexican woman they'd hired to help with the household, took one look at her and sent her grandson galloping for town. "No," Lenora gasped. "Calder. Find Calder first." But Mrs. Rodriguez, who had birthed 8 children of her own, was already guiding her inside. "Senor Knox will come. First, we prepare." The hours that followed blurred together in waves of pain and determination. Calder arrived wild-eyed and dust-covered, having ridden hard from the far reaches of their expanded property. Behind him came an unexpected sight: Dr. Morrison, the town doctor who had refused to treat Lenora months ago when she'd cut her hand on a broken fence. "Doc," Calder said warily. The elderly man cleared his throat. "Your man Rodriguez said there was a baby coming. I took an oath. Knox, whatever's passed between us, I won't let a woman suffer if I can help it." Throughout the long labor, Calder never left Lenora's side. He held her hand through each contraction, whispered encouragement when she thought she couldn't continue, and silently prayed to a God he'd stopped talking to when Elizabeth died. As dawn broke, a new cry pierced the air, strong and healthy and alive. "Doctor." Morrison placed the squalling infant in Lenora's arms, and his professional mask slipped for just a moment. "A fine boy," he said gruffly, "strong as his parents. They named him James, after Lenora's father, and Calder thought his heart might burst from the fierce love that overwhelmed him. This child, this miracle, was theirs, created from their love, their choice to build something new from the ashes of their separate griefs. Word of the baby's safe arrival spread through Broken Bluff like wildfire. What happened next surprised everyone, most of all Calder and Lenora. Mrs. Palmer arrived first, bearing a basket of food and a beautifully quilted blanket. "I know we haven't been kind," she said, unable to meet Lenora's eyes. "But a new baby is a blessing, regardless of circumstances." Others followed. Women who had shunned Lenora brought gifts for the baby, meals for the family, offers of help. Even Tom Garrett's wife appeared, stiff and formal, but bearing an expensive silver rattle. "People can change," she said quietly to Lenora. "Sometimes it just takes seeing others be better than we've been." The test came 3 weeks later. Word arrived that William Hartley had escaped custody during a transfer between jails. The marshal warned he might head their way, seeking some twisted form of revenge or recompense. Calder increased his vigilance, keeping rifles loaded and watching the horizon. But it was Lenora who spotted the rider approaching one afternoon while Calder was in town for supplies. She recognized the horse before the man, the same fine bay Hartley had ridden months ago. She could have barricaded herself inside, waited for Calder's return. Instead, she walked onto the porch, her father's pistol hidden in the folds of her skirt. Baby James sleeping peacefully in his cradle inside. Hartley looked terrible, gaunt, travel-worn, his fine clothes replaced by rough garments. Prison had not been kind to him. "Lenora," he said, dismounting slowly, "I'm not here to cause trouble." "Then why are you here?" He laughed bitterly. "Where else would I go? I've lost everything. My reputation, my freedom, my prospects, all because of you. Because of your own choices," she corrected. "I didn't force you to swindle people or abandon me. No, but you could have saved me if you'd spoken for me at the trial, told them our engagement was real." "But it wasn't real, was it? Not in any way that mattered." He stared at her, this woman he'd once considered an easy mark. She stood tall and confident, no longer the desperate girl he'd left at the hotel. "You've changed." "Yes, I have. The question is, have you?" "I need money," he said bluntly. "Just enough to get to Mexico, start over. You inherited a fortune. Surely you can spare—" "No, Lenora, please, I'm begging you." She studied him for a long moment. This man who had once held such power over her life. Now he was just a desperate stranger, running from the consequences of his actions. "I'll give you a meal," she said finally, "and water for your horse, but then you leave, and you never come back. If you ever show your face here again, my husband will kill you. And if he doesn't, I will." Something in her voice must have convinced him because he nodded slowly. She brought him food, watching as he ate like a starved animal. When he finished, she handed him a small pouch. $50, she said. "Not for you, for the man you might have been if you'd made different choices. Don't waste it." He took the money with shaking hands. "Why show me any kindness at all?" "Because someone has to break the cycle of cruelty. Because my son will grow up in a world where mercy is possible, even for those who don't deserve it." He mounted his horse, looking back one last time. "I did love you, in my way." "No," she said gently. "You loved what you thought I could do for you. There's a difference." She watched him ride away, disappearing into the setting sun. When Calder returned an hour later, alarmed by news that Hartley had been seen in the area, he found her calmly preparing dinner. "He was here," she said simply, "and now he's gone. For good this time." Calder pulled her into his arms. "Are you all right?" "More than all right. I'm free. Completely, finally free." That night, they sat on the porch with baby James, watching the stars emerge. The ranch spread around them, prosperous and growing. In town, attitudes continued to thaw, helped by their generosity and the simple passage of time. "Do you ever regret it?" Calder asked. "The life you might have had back east, the society, the comfort." Lenora laughed, the sound bright in the darkness. "How could I regret this? This life we've built, this love we've found, this child we've made." "Calder, I was meant to be here. Every wrong turn, every heartbreak, every moment of despair, they all led me to that night in the storm, to your door." He kissed her then, pouring all his love and gratitude into the gesture. When they broke apart, she was crying, but her smile was radiant. "Besides," she added with a mischievous grin, "who says we can't have comfort here too? I'm thinking French doors for the new addition, maybe a piano for the parlor. Whatever you want," he said, meaning it. "We'll build it together." "Together," she agreed, resting her head on his shoulder. Inside, James began to fuss, and Lenora went to tend him. Through the window, Calder could see her lifting their son, singing softly as she walked. The sight filled him with such contentment he could hardly breathe. Two broken people had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances. They'd faced judgment, poverty, threats, and their own haunted pasts. But they'd chosen love over fear, forgiveness over bitterness, hope over despair. And in the end, that choice had made all the difference. Calder stood and went inside to his family. Tomorrow there would be work. There was always work on a ranch. But tonight, with his wife and child safe under his roof, with love filling the spaces that grief had once hollowed out, he was the richest man in the territory. In the garden, Elizabeth's roses bloomed on, witnesses to the strange and wonderful ways life continues after loss. And somewhere in the distance, a meadowlark sang its evening song, welcoming another night on the prairie, another chapter in the endless story of love and redemption that plays out beneath the vast western sky. Lenora looked up as he entered, her face glowing in the lamplight. "Welcome home," she said, as she had every night since choosing to stay. "Home," he agreed, gathering his family into his arms. "Yes, we're home." Thank you all for listening to this tale from the Wild West. I hope you enjoyed following Calder and Lenora's journey from heartbreak to hope. Where are you listening to this story? Leave a comment below. I'd love to know if you're by a cozy fireplace, on a long drive, or perhaps even out on the prairie under the stars. Don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Campfire for more stories of love, loss, and redemption in the American frontier. Share your thoughts about Calder and Lenora's story in the comments. What touched your heart the most? Until next time, partners, keep riding toward your own sunrise.